Every year we choose the person of the year, who is the individual who has had the most influence on events, for better or worse. It's hard to argue that anyone had more influence than Donald Trump over the events of this year.
You know, I didn't get Beyonce and Jay-Z and Bruce Springsteen to get crowds. I had just me and ideas that people wanted to hear.
But there's a profound argument about whether his influence was for the better or for the worse. And that really is the challenge that faces him. The country came through this election season more divided conspicuously, publicly, than at any time through any election cycle that most of us can remember.
We're going to have a lot of jobs brought back. I think we're going to have a lot fewer companies leaving our country. I believe we will be successful with defeating ISIS, or bringing them down to a level where it's almost the same thing. And I hope I'm judged from the time of the election as opposed to from January 20th, because the stock market has had a tremendous bounce and people are seeing very good things for business in this country.
One of the things that was remarkable in going to see him, to interview him, is to be in that penthouse, which is the most ostentatious imaginable, marble and mirrors and gold, and see him in the suit and the diamond cufflinks. There's a kind of dissonance that we pressed him about, of how is it that the billionaire is the tribune of the working man. He said he thought that it had to do with that he wasn't a phony, that there have certainly been wealthy politicians before him who in some cases would bend over backwards to make themselves appear like the common man, or do anything that they could, eating the corn dog at the Iowa State Fair and wearing a flannel shirt in New Hampshire. I think he had a very strong instinct that his wealth and the flamboyant display of his wealth was not a liability, that it was actually an asset. Donald Trump is very comfortable sitting down and answering questions, although he very frequently does not remotely answer the question that you asked. In one sense, it feels very undisciplined. In another sense, maybe it's very disciplined in that he knows what he will and will not talk about and is unabashed in completely changing the subject.
Do you feel changed by your election? And how do you think, if I play this tape back in 4 or 8 years, the office will have changed you?
Well, it's a very humbling experience, I can tell you, as somebody that loves this country. It's a very large country, but it's also a even more powerful country than the numbers, because if you look at China and India, and you have others with more people, but when you look at what we do in this country, it's the most incredible place on earth.
A lot of people think that Person of the Year, just because the nature of the name, is an honor. And certainly there have been years where we have recognized people whose influence has been altogether unassailably worthy. Normally that's not the case. I know there are a lot of people who disagree with so much of what Donald Trump said and are very apprehensive about what his presidency means for them and for the country. I think I would challenge them to suggest that someone else this year had more influence and in a way a greater surprise than what he did in 2016.